Je vous disais plutôt que c'est la mienne de notre saison régulière. Ne manquez pas samedi prochain une émission spéciale comprenant les meilleurs moments de saison que nous avons. Mais c'est chacun arrivé de la
Je t'entends dire que c'était ta dernière émission.
Ben oui, Eric, c'est la dernière. Venez là comme ça, voyons!
Le bon gars, Philippe. C'était ma seule raison de me lever avant 3 heures l'après-midi samedi.
Oui, mais tu sais qu'on était quand même en rediffusion le dimanche à 16h.
Tout ce temps-là, je me suis levé samedi matin pour les choses Philippe.
Et tous les gens sont... Ça va bien. Faites attention à nous, Eric. Merci d'être venu nous voir. On se revoit la saison. Vous savez que ces dernières années, 7 des 10 pénitentiaires resserrer leur code vestimentaire. Alors, les visiteuses n'ont donc plus le droit de porter des tenues trop sexy, comme par exemple des mini-jupes ou encore des décolletés trop révélateurs. Alors, vous en parlez, nous recevons 2 experts en matière, M. Claude Poirier et Maître Anne-France Goldwater. Alors, bonjour à vous.
Bonjour, mon frère.
Premièrement, c'est moi qui ai resté où j'ai dit consterné. Et là, si vous avez visité des détenus, mieux vous faire en prison. Mais pas aussi.
Un instant. Claude, mon chéri, je ne suis pas d'accord.
Madame Goldfinger, s'il vous plaît. Attendez, tu as fini ma phrase avant de me couper la parole.
Non. Ce n'est pas vous, un homme, à me dire comment m'habiller. Ah, mais je comprends. C'est parce que je suis une femme, c'est ça?
Madame Golden Retriever, mettez-moi pas des mots dans la bouche. Personne n'a dit.
Écoutez, monsieur Wade, sachez que je suis aussi une avocate.
Mais c'est pas une raison pour me mettre le barreau d'un roux. Arrêtez de mélanger des guenilles avec les serviettes, là.
Oh, les serviettes. Ah oui, les serviettes. Vous voulez me ramener dans la cuisine? Oui, c'est ça. Oh, que faites-vous là? Vous voulez que je vous cuisine peut-être des petites côtelettes de porc? Ça, oui.
Personne n'a parlé de côtelettes de sport, madame Sauce, c'est sûr.
Et si je devais porter une mini-jupe ou un décolleté pour une visite en prison? C'est ennuyeux pour les prisonniers, non? Ils méritent de ça. C'est là, vous ne croyez pas? Avez-vous pensé à eux? Hein?
C'est ce que je fais.
Attention, mon chéri, le problème, ce n'est pas l'habillement des femmes, c'est vous, les hommes, qui n'arrêtez pas de réfléchir seulement avec votre jouet, là.
Dans ce cas-là, je vais être clair et circoncis, là. Qu'une femme va être portée du linge, je suis d'accord avec ça. Mais est-ce que peut-être...
He kept us really busy most of the time. What was going on in Fort McMurray?
Helps to keep busy.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and I hope you're doing okay.
Oh, thank you.
And I apologize for messing up your gender. With everything else going on there, the last thing you need is some guy on the radio messing up your gender.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think my name is a little bit.
Okay. Well, you take care and good luck on your way to Calgary. On our checkup account, M. Lonsdale, it appears all levels of government responded swiftly, generously, and with compassion. Leadership, cooperation, and ongoing monitoring is the key. Christy Munns from Lethbridge, Alberta, tweet, people are coming together to help, but at the same time, there's a lot of public shamming and many pushing their political agenda. Public shaming. There's a lot of public shaming and making a political agenda. There's no spell check on Twitter, perhaps. That's what's going on there. Well, let's go to our next guest. The pictures this week of people leaving their homes in a hurry, grabbing only a few things that they could, were hard to watch. Still was thinking of the fear and bewilderment of the children as they sat in many of those cars, watching the flames all around. One agency saved the children to deal specifically with the needs of the children who are caught up in this week's catastrophe. Colleen Michaud is the senior humanitarian advisor with the organization. She spent the last few days at evacuation centers in Edmonton, but only flown home for a brief visit or returning to Edmonton. She joins us from Calgary. Hi, Colleen.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Have you got any idea how many children have arrived at the evacuation center where you and your colleagues are based?
Well, that's a good question, and it's something that we are trying to pin down. The numbers change daily, of course. A lot of people coming and going, so it's very fluid. We cannot get specific numbers of children to date. We know, for instance, from shelter to shelter, of course, it varies. For example, there's roughly 500 people, and of those, the shelter management estimates that perhaps 50% are children. But what I can tell you is from being in the various shelters, they are full of children of all ages, literally bouncing off the walls at certain times of the day, but from babies to teens to pregnant women. So certainly a very significant part of the population.
How would you describe the conditions?
Well, again, I think they vary. The living arrangements are quite different. So some of them are more dormitory style, where campuses have been called into service. At the large evacuation center, you have more military style seating with cots. Still are in hotels, so it varies. I think that one common quality to all of them is that we know children are more vulnerable following an emergency than adults in many ways, and particularly when they are evacuated out of their own familiar environment into an unfamiliar environment like an evacuation shelter or a dormitory or a hotel. There's a host of considerations for them in particular that don't always get taken into account when we plan for emergencies. We can take a one-size-fits-all approach, and that size is adult.
You said you're more vulnerable. What do you mean by that?
Well, they have different needs. So some of the immediate kind of safety and needs that we would look at in an evacuation center, things like, is there a safe sleeping area for segregated sleeping areas for families, and safe areas for babies to sleep? Are there cribs? What about bathing? If you have a 5-month-old baby and their shower set up, obviously that's not going to work for you. So are there bathing stations? Are there separate washrooms just for families? Are they well lit? So there's a range of real sort of physical security issues. Then also the psychosocial needs of children are different because they react to emergencies differently than adults do. Of course, understand or don't understand emergencies in the same way.
Well, that raises so many of these kids have had really traumatic journeys, and some have lost their homes in fires. Are they talking about what happened?
I don't think you would necessarily hear a child talk about it in the same way as perhaps some of your previous callers who tell the story to you. What we see in our child-friendly space, which is sort of a fancy way of saying a safe play area for children. What we see in those spaces, including the one that we have set up following this disaster, is that children, it will come out in their play. So it comes out in the things that they draw. It comes out in their make-believe play. They'll process the experience in different ways, and perhaps not quite directly as we do as adults.
So if you get beds and the food sorted out for the specific needs for children, what are the next immediate needs for kids? I mean, I guess if the thoughts start to turn towards schooling, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, very important factor for children in recovering from disasters like this is routine, and it's a sense of normalcy. And next to the home, which of course is the main source of that familiar environment, that main source of normalcy, the school is next. So getting children back into school is very, very important. And that's for school-age children. For younger children, preschool or younger, then we have to look at other ways of doing that. All children, and this really is an immediate need. I would say it's right up there with establishing those basic needs, is making sure that they do have safe places to play. That's a very important part of their psychosocial recovery, and giving that kind of sense of something that is normal in a very, very abnormal situation for them.
And last question for you, Colleen Malone. The pictures are difficult even for kids who have been touched by the fire. Children right across the country have been seeing these. How should parents balance talking about what happened in Fort McMurray and then turning off the coverage?
That's something that we Save the Children highly recommend. So it's good to talk about it, good to find out what your child understands about the disaster. You may think that they understand it in a certain way and discover that in fact they don't. So good to find out what do they understand, give them the basics about the emergency in a way that they can grasp, and talk to them about how they feel about it. But we, Save the Children, really recommend try to limit the TV exposure if you can. I know that as adults we're desperate for the news. We're desperate to find out what's going on. I personally was evacuated with my family following the floods in Calgary in 2013, and I know how incredibly difficult it was to follow this bit of advice. I had a young child, at the time, turn off the TV, and for a child having those images playing, it's very confusing and very frightening. It can seem like a disaster is just happening nonstop. So talk to them about it, but also try to turn off the TV. And I should say, it's not just good for kids, it's good for adults too, to have a bit of a break from that.
You're headed back to the evacuation center, and you've spent the past couple of days in the evacuation centers. Is there one moment that stands out for you in the past couple of days?
I would say that there are two. One was in a Toys R Us where we were picking up a couple baby supplies, and we ran into a woman with her 3-year-old, and they had lost their house burned to the ground, and her eyes were red from crying, and she was shopping with her child. And her child, she said, her 3-year-old girl understood that she had lost everything, had lost all toys. How on earth? I think as an adult, it's hard to understand that, and as a 3-year-old, trying to get your head around that, and you could see it in the face of that child. I think the other moment that stood out for me was a young woman I met yesterday, living a First Nations woman from up north, who's in a hotel to give birth today, had been evacuated from her community to give birth in Fort McMurray, and then of course was evacuated again down to Edmonton with only a tiny little bag and nothing in terms of supplies for her newborn baby. So both of those really stood out to me, and I can certainly imagine the difficulty that they're facing.
No kidding. Okay, well, good luck as you head back to the evacuation centers.
Thank you so much. And if people are interested in helping children who have been affected by the disaster, I would ask them to go to www.savethechildren.ca, and we are accepting donations.
Okay, that's great. We've got the plug up there now.
Thanks so much.
Colleen Malone is the Senior Humanitarian Advisor with the organization Save the Children. This is Cross Country Checkup. I'm Duncan McHugh. We're talking about the fire in Fort Mac. You can give us a call at 1-888-416-8333, or you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. There is a conversation going on Facebook right now on our Checkup Facebook page. John Scallon writes in, I have a lot of empathy for the people who lost things in the fire, but I also think about the connection between the worst ecological disaster in Canada and the effects of that on climate change. And Peter Mackey from Nelson, British Columbia writes on Facebook, given global warming and ongoing year-to-year issues with wildfires, the provincial and federal governments need to work together to create a strategy for the future. All levels of government need to be committed to working toward fuel reduction and management strategy that does not disappear when we have a year or a cycle of wet weather. So thanks very much to Peter and John for posting on our Checkup Facebook page. Let's go back to our callers. Dick Gillam is calling from Liverpool, Nova Scotia. Hi, Dick. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
Hello. Thank you.
What are your thoughts about the Fort McMurray wildfire, Dick?
Well, first of all, my wife and I, we lost our home and business a few years ago by fire, and we certainly understand some of the feelings that go along with all that loss. My suggestions I wanted to bring forward may not be applicable in this case, but we had a lot of issues with our insurance providers. We had a good policy. Things went well in the beginning. We met with an insurance contractor, trying to do all the right things. But in the end, we had to end up, because of a lot of problems in construction, reconstruction, we ended up having to sue both companies, actually, the insurance company that we were insured through and also the contracting company. It took us 6 years to get some completion with that, and we never were put back to rights. We lost our business, and we are now living in another place, which it just totally changed our whole life. However, we're healthy and we're moving on. But my suggestions would be that people, if they're starting to have problems with insurance companies, to hire, first of all, a lawyer, and then possibly they should look at an independent adjuster. If we had had those particular professionals with us from the beginning, I doubt if we had gone through a 6-year legal battle to at least get some ending to it. So those are my suggestions to people that are insured, and like I said, it may not apply in this particular case because of the scope of the disaster, but we have a long story to tell someday, but this is not the time, and our hearts go out to the people of Fort McMurray, and those are the new suggestions that I would.
And they're good suggestions, Dick. I mean, there are the folks from Fort McMurray are going to have to start turning their heads to thinking about all the paperwork that's going to have to be filled out soon. And that's a couple of good pieces of advice.
It's good. Yeah, it's good at the beginning, and it went well. But then we had issues, and then when the issues showed up with the reconstruction, then everybody started to pull back. And anyway, it didn't end up well for us. However, we did recoup some things, but we lost our life, basically, of our business and where we live. So,
well, thanks for sharing that helpful advice, Dick.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Let's go from Liverpool, Nova Scotia, over to North Bay, Ontario. Corey Woods is calling in. Hi, Corey. Welcome to Country Checkup.
Hello, how are you?
Doing very well. What are your thoughts about this big fire in Fort McMurray?
Well, my parents just got home, and speaking with them now, like the post-traumatic stress from my dad. I've never seen him in this state, and just kind of the stories he's been telling me and the things he's seen is, horrific. But like my question to Fort McMurray is, for a place that has so many procedures and everything in place to prevent, because these things from happening is like at the time of the Beacon Hill fires, where was their attention? My parents literally had minutes to get out. They were in Beacon Hill.
So your parents are from Fort McMurray?
Yeah, they were in Beacon Hill, and had my mom not been home, my dad was on nights, and he barely got out, and he got his neighbors out, and those neighbors out, and my question is, like, how come nobody was on the fire? Like, they had sent me pictures days before of the fires in their back door, but the winds pushed away, and that was kind of it for the fire. And the reason it burned down is because I guess the winds came back and came through, but nobody had any chance to get out. There was nothing in place to tell people or anything. And that was kind of my question: is how did it get to that point? Why weren't they on the fire before it came back?
Have your parents been able to hear how their home is doing?
Oh, their home's gone. Yeah, their house is actually the front page news. That truck that's burned up. Yeah, and like your last caller with insurance that's a lot of people's biggest fear right now is But luckily they have a good insurance company, and so far so good. But I know everyone's just worried because it could take years before they start to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
And but there is one story that my dad told me about the 881 fires. He spoke with a native man from. I just wanted to tell the story that he told me, but there was a native man on 881 when there was the accident, and I don't think he spoke about himself or got out there. But, I know my dad would have liked to talk to him more and thank him because he was actually there when the crash had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And from what my dad told me, the man, his hair was burned onto his skull, his arms were burned to a crisp, and he just kept telling my dad that he did everything he could and tried to help them. But, it's people like that that deserve, he was like a hero. He was there and he never asked for anything. Apparently he just left, but he did everything he could. And from my dad, she would have said more that, yeah, you did everything you could. And, I guess he felt really bad, but to be in the fire that much, he was burned to a crisp. And, he just left. It was just, when I heard the story, it made me feel terrible, and people like that, it's incredible how they all come together.
Okay. Do your parents have any sense of whether they're going to head back or not, Corey? What are they going to do?
They just got home. They drove home, and at this point, they're not sure. Nobody knows what they're going to do. Like my dad is traumatized. My mom too. I mean, I've never seen them like this before. And their story is just incredible, and they're so stressed and so overwhelmed with it that they can't think, because they were right in it. So at this point, they just don't know. And, luckily the work, their jobs and everything have been cooperative with them. They're just okay, go kind of thing. But I don't think anybody really knows what they're going to do. The scale of it is so big. And what do you go back to? Nobody has anything to go back to now. So that's kind of the question. What do you do? Where's the answers,
Yeah. Well, Corey, thanks very much for sharing your parents' story with us.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. You take care.
Bye.
Eric Nord tweeted at us at the Twitter account. I suddenly and unexpectedly had to leave my home and lost everything but clothes on my back. People's generosity was amazing. Joy, tears. And Hillary Knight is emailing us from Victoria, British Columbia. I'm thinking with tenderness of the folks of Fort Chipewyan who've opened their hearts and homes to the people whose destructive jobs have poisoned their water and food supply and brought them nothing but ill health, death, and misery. Let's go to another caller. Ratam Rautenbach is calling from Edmonton. Hi, Ratam. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
Hi.
What are your thoughts on the Fort McMurray wildfire?
Well, you know what, I just want to say that I feel very sorry about the people who lost their places and their homes and everything else, and also the animal that was killed and lost as well, But I think, first of all, that the responsibility is on us as well. We always seem to act after the fact that the thing happened. So I think we should be prepared before these things happen. So you as a family should be able to make sure you have enough gas, you have enough food, you have things to help you through situations like this. This is only one thing. This is only a fire. There's so many other things that can happen to us. We have a power outage here in the middle of winter for a week. Well, and then we have a real big so, I mean, as a person here in Edmonton, I'm always prepared for these things.
What do you think that governments could be doing to help people prepare better for these kinds of emergencies?
Well, I mean, they should give them access to supplies of these, or make sure they know what are the things they need to have. I mean, you as a family should have enough gas, enough water, enough food, clothing, and even a night shelter if you have to, to take care of these things. I mean, it's not, we always need to act after the fact that these things happen. Like, we should act before this happens. Like, these things now in Edmonton, we know this can also happen here. So we should now make sure that all these places around Edmonton are fireproofed, like with some kind of a way they make sure that the trees are not so close to themselves, so if we're fire, that we can contain this,
And you are in Edmonton, town. Can you give me a sense of what you're seeing in terms of evacuees now coming into your city from Fort McMurray?
Well, I have friends that came back now from Fort McMurray, and they seem very low and moral. They are, the morale is very low. Yes, and they are they're afraid of what they have to. And that's all I know about that. I mean, I'm a person looking from the outside in. Yes. So it doesn't affect me, but I mean, it affected like 90,000 people, and $9 billion later. Why do we need this? I mean, we don't need this. I mean, we should be able to take care of these things before these things happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ted, thanks very much for sharing those thoughts.
All right, thank you.
Let's go to Woodstock, New Brunswick, where Aaron Baum is calling in. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to CrossFit.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing very well. What do you think about Fort McMurray and what's going on there?
Well, it's a massive tragedy. Luckily we haven't had that many not that much loss of life, but
it is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I have friends there that's actually, I've never been there myself, but I have friends there, and I know a number of them have lost their homes, and then I know that actually I've talked to two in the last couple of days, and some of them have driven to Ontario or driven back home here to Woodstock, and they said to me that they replied back saying that they still know that their houses are still standing. So that's good news.
That's good news.
Yeah, and that's absolutely. I mean, I know that that's just one out of many thousands, but at least that's one news out of it anyway.
Absolutely, and I mean, I guess, what do you think? You said it's going to need to be a countrywide effort. What do you think it's going to take to help Fort McMurray recover?
I think it's going to take, what's going to happen is we need to get a national-wide effort going in almost every province. I mean, we have that going now, but they're going to need other people, like carpenters, and they're going to need people from all over the country to come over there to the city, because despite the psychological damage, the physical damage is quite immense. It's almost as if it's a city almost double the size of Frederick, which is our capital in New Brunswick. I mean, it's going to take it's going to take people all the way from Newfoundland down to British Columbia. I mean, they couldn't have hit at a more prepared area. I mean, Alberta and British Columbia and Saskatchewan are the most prepared for forest fires. I mean, a province like New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, we simply don't have the landmass or the resources to respond to something like that. We need outside help for sure.
Okay. Well, Aaron, thank you very much for sharing those thoughts today.
Okay, thank you.
That was Aaron Bowman, who's calling from Woodstock, New Brunswick. My next guest is a fire ecologist. Robert Gray studies the behavior of wildfires, and he joins us now from Chilliwack in British Columbia. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Duncan.
We heard a caller just a couple calls ago who said, why wasn't there more notice? And I guess my first question for you, Robert, is could the extent of the fire at Fort McMurray have been predicted?
Well, certainly with the weather we've had in the last several years, in northerly latitudes especially, I mean, we had 3 million hectares burned in Northwest Territories, 5 million acres burned in Alaska last year. Alberta has seen equally large fires in the last several years in the boreal. And we know that with climate change patterns that we've had recently, that the northerly latitudes are drying out, they're staying drier longer, so fire seasons are definitely longer, and conditions are ripe for very, very large scale fire.
And so, again, is there any way that it could have predicted?
Well, certainly with the weather conditions that they had, I mean, the fire was noticed and attacked on the Sunday. I can't really, quarterback the thing or second guess manages on the ground, but
yes,
the weather forecasts were there. I mean, the dry cold front was forecasted, and I'm sure the strong winds from the southwest were forecasted as well once the system went down. So, when we have large fires, part of the suppression tactic is to have long-term assessments on just how far could this fire get based on historic weather patterns, and we see down the road as far as weather. So, something that has those weather conditions forecasted, a fire that ballooned from 7,000 hectares to 85,000 would be part of that assessment. It may be the 99th percentile, but it would be part of that assessment.
You talked about climate change patterns. In general, is the number or severity of forest fires in Canada changing?
Yes, it is. In the last 10 years or so, we've got longer periods of drying than, even deep dust layers and large blocks become overly drier than we've seen them historically. And when they burn, when they're consumed, they have a long residence time. So a lot of that heat goes down versus up. And the consequences are we change soil chemistry, we change soil biota, and we have almost a sterilizing effect. So we greatly reduce productivity and resilience in soil. So that's a measure of burn severity. So the longer these fire seasons, the longer these periods of drought are, and once we do have fire, we have the capability of seeing pretty extensive burn severity over large areas.
So what's your thinking on how wildfire should be managed?
Well, where we have opportunities to, let Mother Nature do a lot of the heavy lifting for us through natural ignition in places where we do that long-term assessment and they're not going to impact, communities and other infrastructure, definitely manage some of Mother Nature's fires to do a lot of the good work that fire needs to do. In places where we have to have more control on how large that fire could be, we need to be doing the actual burning ourselves. And some of that may require upfront thinning, changing vegetation, and then following up with prescribed burning. And so we need to be doing a lot more of that. It's not cheap. There's a consequence as far as smoke and things like that, but it's better than having this type of fire.
Well, you were involved in a major assessment of the Kelowna fires that happened back in 2003, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and that was one of the main kind of teachings coming out of that was that there's just a lot of fuel in the woods.
There is. We have an overabundance of fuel. I mean, we've, in our driest ecosystems, we've missed, in places 10 or more rotations of fire. Basically fire occurs that frequently and we put them out so effectively that these systems are in a fire deficit. We start to move into, more moist ecosystems northerly. The deficit isn't as bad, but in most places, our fire regimes are well departed from where they were historically, and that basically means that we've had a significant accumulation of fuel from the forest.
And so how do you think this Fort McMurray fire is going to affect the environment in that area?
Well, looking at it, I've looked at some of the heat signature, in the large area of the fire, and it appears to be quite variable. So there are definitely some patches where it burns really hot, and you're likely to have some, fairly high burn severity. Other places that skip, there's islands that didn't burn, and there's a whole range of basically severities. So any place where, you have really, really hot fires, you probably killed most of the plants on the site. You may have changed soils, but any of those places where the severity was lower, those important plant propagules, with underground roots and rhizomes and corms and bulbs, and they survive, and so they'll resprout, once the rains start to come in the area. And then they, over the next year or years afterward, they will basically use their seed, through wind dispersal and animal dispersal to reinvade those heavily burned areas. So I would anticipate that, it's going to green up pretty good. bit later this year, and then next year it might look quite different. There won't be a forest there, but in places, for example, where you have a lot of aspen resprouts, once you kill the parent, you can get 50,000 stems that come in after it. So you'll actually see a lot of aggressive aspen invasion of the burned area, which is a good thing.
Okay. We heard one last question for you, Robert Gray. We heard Green Party leader Elizabeth May link this fire to climate change, and immediately there was quite a response that said this is no time for politicking. And obviously, we put on the show today. There are people who are in some really struggling right now, given so much hurt there. But we do hear scientists saying, and I hear you saying that clearly wildfires are getting worse. Do you think that our government's ready? No. When we've had some discussions about, adaptation of plant species and things like that, planting different trees. After we harvest places, thinking about how migration may occur or may not occur. But the reality is, we have to be looking more at resilience. We need forests to survive fires. We need community to survive fires, and that means doing a lot more on the ground as far as managing that potential energy, which is the fuel. We're not doing a good enough job with that. So we can certainly look at, how ponderosa pine may advance north over the next, couple of decades. Mm-hmm. But we have to have the conditions where ponderosa pine can actually do that. If we wait it all out through large-scale fire, we're going to have to aid in that basically that migration. The better thing to do up front is to basically reduce sand density, encourage deciduous where we can, and reduce fuels. And that's going to allow our forests and our other organisms to evolve with these changes in climate. Okay. Well, Robert, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us today.
You're welcome.
Robert Gray is a fire ecologist with R.W. Gray Consulting Limited. He's based in Chilliwack, British Columbia. This is Cross Country Checkup. I'm Duncan McHugh. We are, of course, talking about the fire in Fort Mac. You can call us at 1-888-416-8333 or find us on Twitter and Facebook. You can search Checkup at CC. Of course, you can always send us an email. Susan Young in Kelowna, British Columbia, sent us an email. My family suffered a total loss fire in Kelowna. My advice to those who lost their homes in Fort Mac: one of the hardest things is the loss of precious and sentimental photos and belongings. These are precious because of the memories attached to them. No one can ever take away your memories from you. You're stronger than you think, and you will survive this. Ross Williams, Calgary, Alberta emails. It's been said a lot this week that helping out during a crisis like this is a, quote, rare thing, and it's absolutely true. I'm born and raised in Alberta, so I know firsthand how true this is. But I have also lived across the country, seen such generosity and help everywhere whenever there's a crisis. This week I've heard many people say that even though they're giving, they wish they could give more. This has struck me, that we're giving and apologizing at the same time. That's a uniquely and truly Canadian thing. No kidding. Okay, well, thanks very much for sending those emails. If you want to participate online, you can send an email, checkup@cbc.ca, or find us on the Twitter or the Facebook. I'll go to Jennifer Badiak, who's calling from Wandering River, Alberta. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts about the fire at Fort McMurray?
It's total devastation. It's total loss. I was down at the fire hall Wednesday and Thursday, pretty much all day, both days, and got to see firsthand the generosity of the country, but the devastation from individuals who are just finally getting off the highway and getting some gas and getting some food and trying to figure out where they're going next.
Well, describe that for me. What was it like?
Well, I was at the school and library on Tuesday evening when we heard that there was a total evacuation, and I had just poked my head outside. I was like, wow, there's like people all over the place. Wonder we only have maybe 400 people that live here year-round.
Right.
So it's a tiny town. And so his vehicles parked all over. And we were like, well, what's happening? What's going on? And we hadn't heard anything, if there was going to be any emergency services set up here or an evacuation center. We didn't know anything at the time. So Wednesday morning, I had checked my phone and there was a message from the school that school was canceled. So I was like, okay, well, that's all right. So then we figured, well, we'll drive into Wonder River and we'll grab some like big bottles of water because we needed some drinking water, and we went to town, and it was unreal. There was a lady was sleeping in the box of her pickup just parked in the ditch down one of the side roads, and I didn't realize there was someone in there until I went by, and she sat up and she was just covered in a tub. And then we drove right into town, and I had my son with me because I want you to see this. I want you to experience this, right? Just to remember this. And someone had put evacuated their horses as well, but they were in their trailer and there was no fences or anything around. So they put them on the skating rink. So they were all enclosed in the forest, and they'd given them water and hay. And then we got further into kind of like half a block further down, and you couldn't drive anymore. So we just parked by the school, and we just walked into the store, and like everybody was just grateful that they were no longer. To me, nobody was being really emotional or really upset. They were just like relieved that they were no longer trapped on the highway, because lots of people didn't have enough gas, and they didn't have water. They didn't have the supplies to deal with our deal like that. And so I got my water and I went home and I dropped my son off, and I told my husband, I said, I'm going back in. I'm going to do what I can to help. I was a former member of the fire department. I knew that there was going to be something happening. Someone was going to arrange something. So when I got back into town, the fire chief and another guy said, well, we're going to start cooking burgers and handing out beverages. So they got some barbecues, and I just started walking around the town and telling people there's burgers and drinks over at the fire hall, burgers and drinks over at the fire hall. And I talked to my sister just on the way into town. She's like, yeah, I hear there's like 7,000 people in Wonder River. And I had no clue, because there's just so many people. And about 1, 2 o'clock that afternoon, donations started coming in from, like, the people from the community were bringing stuff in, but stuff started coming in from outside. Like, one of the first truckloads was from Fort Saskatchewan, and then there was another one from Sherwood Park, and then literally after that, you just lost track. Because people were like, gotta get to Wonder River. There's no food, there's no gas there, and people would trip off the jerry can and water, and it was just absolutely overwhelming with the number of people coming in who needed help, and the amount of help that was coming in to help us.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like things were running pretty smoothly, all things considered.
Okay, yeah, we managed to get through it. And the second 5 o'clock that night, some city buses started rolling in, and they were trying to get them to keep going on to Aquabish, and some of them were people who were evacuated north and came south. But it was the seniors that were at the lodge in Addison that were on the one bus. So we all helped them off and got them to use the washrooms. And the second lady on the bus was my great auntie, and that's when it really hit home for me. That's when it really hit home for me. I was like, wow, I was worried about her, and we had no idea where she was.
And how's she doing?
She was really glad to see people that she knew, and she was really looking forward to finally settling in. They had been traveling, I think she had said something like 11 or 12 hours at that point. On the bus, yeah.
Jennifer, I'm glad your great auntie's okay.
Yes, we're all relieved.
Thanks so much for...
so many people, yeah, no. You're welcome.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your story with us on Cross Country Checkup.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Leanne Shannon, who's on her way to British Columbia. She's also from Fort McMurray. Hi, Leanne. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you're from Fort Mac.
Yes, we are.
When did you leave?
We were in the Wood Buffalo area, and at around lunchtime, shortly after lunchtime, we realized that the fire was much more out of control than was the case in the morning. And so we turned on the radio and were listening, and we knew that we were on alert in our area. And shortly after that, I got a call from our kids' school to come and pick them up. So I went and got the kids, but everybody was in panic at that time. I passed 3 accidents in the matter of like 3 kilometers maybe. And so at that point, that's when I kind of had to start talking out loud to my kids and saying how important it was to stay calm. And I people were in an accident, it's going to make it much more worse. But my daughter's crying and my son is crying, and it was really difficult at that time to try to stay calm. But we did get to our home. To add to it, too, my husband was on night shift, so I was trying to wake him up on the phone, but was having difficulty reaching him. He wears earplugs, and so he was waking up. Eventually, he did wake up, thank goodness, and he started packing for us. And when we got home, he was already starting to pack, and we got the kids in and told them to go pack whatever they needed. That was important to them. And my husband went and started picking up our trailer, and we just kept listening to the news, and pretty soon it was a mandatory evacuation. And so I took my three boys in the car, and my husband took my daughter in the truck with him in the truck and trailer. And we really wanted to follow we actually really want, like everybody else, we wanted to go south because that's the only way out of town. You don't really want to be stuck up north.
Stuck up there, no.
No, but we didn't want to add to the confusion, and we knew the municipality, probably had a good plan in place, and so we just went with what the radio was telling us to do. So we went north.
How old are your kids, Leanne?
My son is 10, and then I have an 8-year-old daughter and 6.
We were talking with Colleen Malone for Save Children earlier on, and talking about how difficult it can be for children. How are they doing?
They're doing well now. We didn't feel shock about it in the whole, because school was in a panic. I was in a panic. Everything was kind of that was the hardest part for them. They were kind of in shock, I think, and crying and everything. But once we were on our way out and going north, and we were kind of free of the city, then they were able to calm down. And over the next couple days, we ended up at Shell Albion Village, and they were wonderful with us. But we were able to do little things like phoning our home answering machine and the kids and checking our bib and security alarms. And that gave the kids some comfort, as well as us. Their home was still safe.
And so your home is okay?
It is, yes.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
That's good news. Yeah. What's next for you, Leanne?
We're heading out to BC to stay with my family until we're allowed back in the city. Yeah. But I just wanted to say also that I know lots of people have been talking about the generosity of everybody all across Canada, and it has been amazing. Like, it was a really emotional trip going south to the city once they actually opened up the highway, seeing the devastation in the city, and once you get through the other side, and cars are just abandoned everywhere, and I just realized how lucky we were going north, because the camp took care of us. We had no worries. We just had to sit and be patient and wait until the emergency personnel thought it was safe enough for us to go through, whereas other people were stuck going through the fire or being stuck on the side of the highway without gas. And my heart just broke when I went through there, and just to see the generosity of people at every rest stop offering water and to fuel you up, and it was really an emotional trip. So, and yeah, it was a relief to get to Edmonton, and everywhere you went in Edmonton, they're offering help. We had people we didn't even know pay for our meal on the first night we were in Edmonton, and it's just been amazing, the support all across Canada.
Well, that's a silver lining in all this.
It is, yeah.
Leanne, Shannon, thanks so much for taking some time, and good luck on the rest of your journey out to British Columbia.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, you take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
The fires are not out yet, but thoughts are already turning to rebuilding. It's hard to know where people will begin in Fort McMurray, as so much damage has been inflicted on the city and its neighborhoods. My next guest is joining me in the studio here. He's someone who works out these practicalities. Paul Kovacs is the founder and executive director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at Western University. His expertise is in reducing the risk of loss from disasters, including wildlife, and in disaster resilience, the ability of a community to bounce back after a catastrophe. Hi, Paul. Welcome to Across Your Chat.
Good to see you, Doug.
What is the priority once the flames are out?
The immediate next step is to make sure that everybody is safe and that it's a good time to come and look in the community and stuff, see where the loss and the damage is. But once we know where the loss and damage is, then it's time to get on with the rebuilding. This is a process that we've had to do before in Slave Lake and Kelowna and elsewhere. We have to put homes back. We have to put back the businesses, the schools and the hospitals and things that are damaged. And it's a process that takes years.
And what specific things would you be keen to look at as populations start talking about returning?
So fire is usually very destructive. There are other events like floods where there's some water, you can get the water out and then maybe you couldn't just move back in, or it may have done great destruction. So finding the degree of damage for some perils. But fire is often quite catastrophic. The home, the neighborhood is simply gone. And so there's a need to assess by proper government officials whether it's safe to rebuild. There can be toxic chemicals that build up from the ash that falls from the fire that is burned. And is the ground that's being built upon safe to build again? Once that's all done, then you just get on with construction phase. You have to get the, usually these are covered by insurance. You have to have an insurance company come in and look at the nature of the damage and the loss and agree on how to rebuild and how to get going.
If the ground is safe, that's got to be a difficult task in and of itself.
It's incredibly important. It's a big part of the Slave Lake event too. The heat of this fire, the degree of the burning. You can imagine the chemicals that were left free. We didn't just have trees that burned. We had houses that burned underground. We had cars that burned and other things. And all of this has gone somewhere, often into the ground.
The water treatment plant in Fort McMurray seems to have survived. That's the latest that we've got. If that's the case, how helpful is that?
That's incredibly important. So you can start the process of putting back a new home or a business, but you can't actually move back into that community unless all the systems work. So you need a water treatment facility, you need electricity and phones and cable and all of those essential supplies to make the whole system work. Water treatment is something that can often take a very long time to put in place. So that's one of the key things that needs to be checked really thoroughly, and if that's up and running, then that's really going to be helpful for the homes that were not damaged and for the homes that will need to be rebuilt.
You mentioned supplies. I just really begin to imagine the massive amounts of supplies that are going to need to be brought in. What's the biggest challenge there?
Fort is a community where the logistics of supply have been thought about for many, many years. It's always been a relatively remote area with mainly one road in, but there's other ways to get supplies in, maybe by aircraft or whatever, but one road to take in most supplies. So there have been many times where to feed the very unique production facilities, big convoys of materials had to be brought up the road. So it's a community that thinks about these things. But now we have to go find all these supplies. So if you're rebuilding many homes, you have to find a lot of lumber, you have to pour a lot of concrete. There's many things that will need to be done. And again, this will take time. You need to find the people to do the building, and you find the construction materials to do the construction.
We were speaking with a fire ecologist, Robert Gray. He was talking about, the vegetation in the area has just been absolutely scorched. What kind of impacts does that have in the surrounding area in the months and years ahead?
It's incredibly important that we've had events, including Kelowna not that long ago, and many events elsewhere around the world, where the fire changes the landscape and leaves a community prone to other risks. Slave Lake has had, Fort McMurray has had flooding in the past. And so having all these trees now burned to the ground, the flooding risk is now changed, right? It's not better or worse, it's simply a different kind of risk. The water can hit the ground and move faster, and the water can hit the ground and carry various chemicals and whatever when it comes to the river. So the risk of flooding is going to be quite different for the next few years.
Okay. We're hearing the folks who have been phoning in today say they're bound, that they are going to rebuild there. But I've got to assume that there are bound to be people who won't go back to Fort McMurray. And is that something that's common when a place gets devastated like this?
So we completed a study last year, and we went to hundreds of homes that were destroyed in Kelowna and Slave Lake, the two biggest fires that we've had in our history. And we wanted to appraise 200 homes in Kelowna, and about 400 or 500. Exactly. Yeah, almost 250 in Kelowna and almost 500 in Slave Lake. And we went to every one of the homes to see what we had done since. What kind of home we put back? Did we put back better? How were we taking care of that risk? And we found there were many that were not back. To actually put a number on it is difficult, but it was probably more than 20% of the homes now, many years later, did not get put back. So these people chose to move away. And in Fort McMurray, for a whole host of reasons, that will be a choice that some people will think about and decide to do, that they don't immediately want to rebuild. They'll move on with their life and they'll move elsewhere. I think the vast majority do want to move back to Fort McMurray. It's a thriving community, and it will be again. But there will be some who will choose not to go back.
A lot of people just feel helpless at a time like this, that the fire is too much to deal with. Your business is resilience. So what do you think that people can do practically to be resilient as possible in the face of a disaster?
So these extreme events do have some very positive elements that have been discussed about people pulling together to help, especially during this immediate period of response, but also can have this long-term positive effect in terms of making people think in the community and in other communities about how these risks should be managed. So there is a lot of good literature that's been around, and a lot of good evidence about how to live in these vulnerable areas vulnerable to wildfire, and live as safely as possible. But maybe not enough people in Fort McMurray thought about them in the past, but they will put more attention to these things in the future. One of the top programs called Fire Smart. Fire Smart is a national program, but it's been supported and grew out of Alberta and is very actively used in Alberta and BC and Saskatchewan and Alberta. And I think everybody in Fort McMurray should be aware of Fire Smart and what it means. It talks about how to have a defensive space around your home. It talks about the need to make sure that your home is built out of fire-resilient materials. There's a number of things that have been talked about, have been known in the past. Were they understood by everybody in Fort McMurray? I think they'll be better understood. I think they'll be part of the rebuilding and the recovery process, is to think about the knowledge that exists out there and how it applies to each family.
There have been people comparing this fire to Slave Lake. You've looked at and studied Slave Lake and other disasters. What are your observations of trying to? I mean, I know that Fort McMurray is still unfolding as we speak, but what are your observations on the comparisons?
Yeah, we haven't been allowed back in. The fire's not out. We don't have enough information about Fort McMurray specifically. Since Slave Lake, we have been hoping that was a wake-up call to a lot of people living in that part of Canada, in the northern part of Canada, that once these forests burn, we have these remarkable individuals who go out and put these fires, and 95% of the time, or whatever it is, they put out the fires very quickly before it expands and grows. But if you get away, and when they get away, they can grow very quickly, and they're incredibly unpredictable. And so for people living in these areas, they can cause great destruction quickly. So like a third of the community was destroyed. In Fort McMurray, it won't be a third of the community, but it'll be a high percentage of a larger community. So there'll be larger losses in Fort McMurray than there were in Slave Lake. But there are many, many communities across the northern part of Canada, northern part of Alberta and BC and Saskatchewan, that have the similar kind of vulnerability. They're in a large forest. They're in forests that burn. They will be protected by brave souls who will go out and fight these fires. But every now and then, one will get away, and every now and then it'll get away when the weather is just doing the wrong thing. And so bad luck will come again someday.
There are lots of people who are trying to figure out the costs of this. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's too early. And to properly do the cost, you have to go in and see what's there. And the information coming out about which properties are destroyed or the state is quite mixed right now. We see some visual going out of communities completely and destroyed, and goes out to people who can see their own homes and some of the damage they're seeing. And then other pieces of evidence show parts of the community where they have fought it back. The fire did not get in, and it did not spread, and did not do the damage. So it's too early to put a number on it.
We've seen the Bank of Montreal say that it could be $9 billion.
Yeah, so that's interesting speculation, but it's not a measure of what's happening, and that'll take a little bit longer before we can actually measure what's happened. But I think with a lot of confidence, it's quite clear this is the largest disaster in Canadian history. This is big in its life. Like, this will probably add up to being much more than the flood in Calgary and the ice storm in Quebec.
You mentioned the Fire Start program. Is there any other lesson, do you think, that both provincial, federal, municipal governments should be taking away from what we're seeing unfold here?
Again, Canadians should be very proud, as I hear they are, of the terrific coordination and support that has been coming from the government and from individuals and corporations. It's been a great coming together to help and do the right things to evacuate. An evacuation of this size is unprecedented fire, and on the scale that has almost never happened before. And so there's a lot of positives to reflect upon. At the same time, there is a broad sense that our nation has spent less focusing on preventing hazards from becoming disasters. In this case, a wildfire, but there's also other risks like flooding and earthquakes and windstorms that we could, as a country, have a better coordinated, greater investment in an overall mitigation prevention strategy. And I hope that will be one of the long-term lessons that we will take out of Fort McMurray.
Paul Kovacs, thanks so much for joining us in the studio, sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Duncan.
Paul Kovacs is the founder and executive director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at Western University. This is Cross Country Check. I'm Duncan McHugh. We're talking about the fire at Fort Mac. You can call us at 1-888-416-8333 or find us on Facebook. Ron Crudge is writing on Facebook right now as a 35-year past resident. I am so proud of McMurrays, that's people from Fort Mac, he says in parentheses. I would really like to see the news concentrate on the positive side, as we all hear, all we hear is the devastation. I know there is a lot to be thankful for. And Patricia Hartman from Toronto emailed us to say that the Alberta SPCA is organizing pet rescues for all the animals that were left behind in Fort McMurray. They have a form set up on their website, rmwb.ca/pet rescue/ and we have tweeted that link at Checkup CBC. So if you want to see that link to the Alberta SPCA, then go to our Twitter. Let's go to a caller. David Burns is calling from Calgary. Hi, David. Welcome to Cross Country Check.
Hi, Duncan.
What are your thoughts about the Fort McMurray fire, David?
Well, I'm not surprised to see the generosity of Albertans for people in trouble. We are very much a generous people. This whole disaster is going to devastate Alberta further. I think I heard they're going to give out $100 million from an already tapped out budget to people who are now essentially disaster refugees for pocket change. And the economic impact to the energy industry, which heavy oil was one of the only things that was still really moving forward, we don't even know what that's going to look like yet. Plus, communities, what this reminds me of, having lived through the Calgary floods, is some people never recovered. They're still, and to this day, wrestling through the financial hardships that that whole situation caused. And so to hear Elizabeth May and other, carbon tax Nazis jumping around saying this is a great thing because it's going to help us meet our targets, I have to say it's absolutely revolting. And she should be dismissed from ever serving public office for making a comment like that this time.
There's no question that there are already economic wars going on. What do you think is going to need Fort Mac is going to need to rebuild?
Well, we need to find out, how this happened. This was a major mistake. And one of my questions is given how tight the budget was, were they caught unprepared when this fire blew up, right? And this has been described as one of Canada's most expensive natural disasters. So I think the press, especially now when details are still fresh, should be really looking at what's going on and trying to figure out how we got to this. Because this is, like I say, it would devastate not just Alberta, but the rest of this country. we maybe don't know. But
it may still be early days. I mean, we just had Paul Kovac saying that it's still early days to try to sit
but
down.
it could be like war, like they could be having to build war camps. Like, you've lost the city now, and now you're going to literally turn the north into a series of war camps in order to, and we just sent a whole, trainloads of heavy equipment from the oil and gas industry off to different, there was a big story about Richie doing a huge sale of all the heavy equipment. So this province is slowly but surely drained. And we really need some, we seem to have a lot of money to argue about bathrooms and stuff like that, but I'm really becoming concerned that, maintenance of the infrastructure, making sure that we have the resources so that the province probably functions, and it's starting to be neglected as governments are just strapped for cash increasingly.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for sharing that views, David. Frank Elias is calling from Carmen, Manitoba. Hi, Frank. Welcome to Country Checkup.
Hey, Duncan. How are you today? I'm good. Listen to some of your show, a few comments about that guy there that called from Edmonton and said the people should have been better prepared.
Yes, okay.
I think it took kind of offense to that if I was one of them people, because from what I've been hearing is they didn't really have a lot of time. Some basically it's not time to grab a passport. Some were sleeping from working. Sounded like he was kind of retired and maybe didn't have a lot to do. But put a box full of stuff together to have ready.
Yes.
That's all fine and dandy, but we live out in the prairie, so when we go out in the car, we've got a little box in the back there with blankets and, bars and whatnot, but that's only good for a day or two. So these people are going to be out of a place for months, years.
Yeah. And it would have been impossible for them to know at that point that they would have been gone.
And every time, do you feel you're caught up every time you leave a house? I mean, I don't know. I just thought it was, he came down pretty hard on those people had enough to deal with. And the first responders are just doing, I thought, I don't know if they're getting enough recognition or not, but the firefighters, the responders, the cops, whoever's involved, there wasn't a fatality except for those people that got road rage on the highway, I guess. Other than that, nobody burned to death in a house. That's pretty amazing.
It is remarkable, isn't it, Frank?
Well, yeah, they've done a great job. And just another thing that crossed my mind is like we're giving money to all these countries, where maybe we should put a little more aside for when these disasters do happen at home. I mean, it's good to help. We can't help the whole world. It seems like every time there's a crisis overseas or somewhere we're sending money here, sending money there, when something turns out, a guy gets $1,200. Well, what's $1,200 going to do for a family? So, just a few thoughts.
Okay. Well, thank you for those thoughts, Frank.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Don Thomas is emailing us from Canmore, Alberta. The financial cost of the Fort McMurray fire will be staggering. Not only will the Alberta government's outlay be hundreds of millions of dollars for firefighting and for emergency funds for evacuees, but the greatly reduced production by oil sands plants will cost the government hundreds of millions of dollars. We in Alberta will be living with the impact of this disaster for decades to come. Michael Wade Skinner is calling from Newmarket, Ontario. Hi, Michael. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
How are you doing, Duncan?
I'm doing very well. What do you think about Fort Mac?
Well, I was just listening to the last couple of people who called in, and there's a lot about the infrastructure and the economics of this. But, personally, I have 5 siblings who are in Fort McMurray. Grew up originally in Newfoundland, one of 10 children. And of the 10 children in my family, none of us live in the hometown in Newfoundland because most have moved out to Fort McMurray. And what's interesting for me is that it's a personal tragedy and loss, and we can't lose sight of the human and familial losses that are happening for people, aside from all of the economic concerns, which are valid, but that repeat. Some of my family members lost their homes. And I guess I would describe it as a displacement of the displaced people. We already know what it means to have a disaster when a fishery was closed, and I always refer to us as economic refugees who left home to find work and etc. And so interesting for me, and as I talk to my family, when I call them, I reach them and find out they're safe, gratefully. That most of my siblings would remember times when they were roughing it, and that's just how we grew up, without running water, without electricity. And so for us, as in our immediate family, we have the experience of doing without. What I think has been taken away is the security of knowing that they had jobs, they had income, they had even more than we had growing up. But right now they're right back to the basics. Things like they need pillows. Things like they get together and there's 4 families at a campsite. They go to get groceries, but the grocery shelves are pretty much decimated by the fact that so many people are going to same small grocery stores. But I do want to say that my family is telling me the countless stories of the kindness and generosity of people, and to the point that that's what brings them to tears more than the devastation itself. I know my family in a sense as Newfoundlanders, we would give our heart if we thought that maybe somebody would live a little longer. But to have that generosity show back to you, and they were talking about pulling off the side of pulling off to try to get gas and finding people in parking lots, giving them food, etc., paying for groceries at the store. When they were buying clothes for their kids, people behind them were paying for their foods that they were buying, and it's been a tremendous story of, for me as somebody who is not there but has siblings and nieces and nephews, etc., cousins, to be able to stop and know, okay, they're being taken care of. Someone is watching out for them. And it relieves. And I remember asking my sister, do you want it? Is there anything you want? Is there anything that I can do? And she said, I think we're okay right now, but I'll let you know next week or tomorrow. But for now, we're okay. And I think that's where the Canadian heart is with Fort McMurray. Are people okay?
Can I ask you this, Michael, because you said that your family's from Newfoundland. I mean, there is Fort McMurray is a curious city and town in the sense that there's kind of a pioneering aspect to it. There are so many people who are from away, who are there for the work. Do you think that those people are going to head back to Fort Mac, or are they just going to pick up and say that's it and head back off somewhere else?
I think you might see a little of both. I think as some of my siblings were close to retirement age anyway, they may not have that they may wish to go home. I know that even in the interim, right now, some of the family members are heading home until they find out when they need to return, rather than stay in Alberta, and they're just returning because they have a village or a town to return to there. And that's one of the great things I have to say about being a Newfoundlander, and I tell my kids, you can always go home. If the bomb falls out of her, you can go home. I think the younger nieces and nephews, etc., I think their life and their whole that's who they are with regards to their potential careers and all of that stuff is rooted in being in Fort McMurray. So I would imagine you would see probably the younger stay and the older might move on and come back home.
Right. Okay. Well, Michael, I'm glad to hear that your siblings are all doing well.
Great. And one of the nicest things that was happening for me when we were in our panic was of social media, in the sense that it was wonderful to be able to have the contact, and on Facebook when my family and my cousins were checking in that they were safe, and to get those notifications, it was a great way of communicating, even whatever supports are available to them. So that was wonderful. So
makes a big difference. Thanks very much for joining us on Check Up.
Thank you.
That was Michael Skinner, who's calling from Newmarket, Ontario. We're going to go over to Alberta now, Grand Prairie, where Douglas Osmond is calling in. Hi, Douglas. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
Hello, sir.
What are your thoughts on Fort Mac?
Well, my emotions have never been so I don't know how to describe it, so with people and so with that area there that there's been the days in this week there that I've been driving along and a tear come down my cheek. My heart goes goes out to those people in that region, and it just must be devastating. At one point in my life, I know what it's like to be homeless because I was homeless, and it was for a brief time, and to have that many people all at once to be going through what we're going through, it's just beyond me. And my heart goes out to them. I've been unemployed here for 6 months. I just got back to work, and I had a little bit of money, so I wanted to go to check for a couple $100, and I sent it off. And for a little bit that I can do, and I think if everybody in this country does a little bit, it's going to work. It'll work for those people up there. I mean, everybody's on board. We're going on board. There's another thing that strikes me, something that's really bothering me, because I drive a water truck here in Grand Prairie, and I get to drive in the region here and the boundaries of Grand Prairie. And for the last 2 weeks, just getting out of my truck and walking to the bush, or just being in the area, it was so tender dry here, so to the point where it's raining today. It got almost snow here. The rain is good. But the thing is here, everyone has to step to the plate here and make sure that this kind of situation doesn't happen again, or try to do some prevention in this. And what I mean by that is, if somebody would have dropped a match in the southwest of Grand Prairie here, there would have been the same circumstances in Grand Prairie as what went on in Fort McMurray, and that's only one town. What is happening is developers' responsibility for the safety and well-being of people in those homes have to be brought to such a standards, and it's a different world that we live in now. We live in a totally different world altogether.
How so? What do you mean, Douglas?
Well, I mean, you have to, because of global warming, because of what the trend of fires like this and whatnot, we have developed our infrastructure to the point where we need to make it safe for people to live in their homes. Yeah, and there's got to be ways of doing it. I mean, we have technology that can do things. One of the things I thought today was this was a stupid idea, but there's fire hazards everywhere. Why can't they be interconnected to a sprinkler system on boundaries of those subdivisions, where all of a sudden, if there is a problem, they can be turned on and so early like that? That's just one thought, right?
Right.
I mean, I think as of today, as of this moment, the federal government, the provincial government, and the cities have to sit down and form a task force and figure out what is going on here with these situations.
Okay.
And you're thinking of children here. You're thinking of families that have been destroyed. They immediately, because this is 2 times in 10 years this is happening in Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
This is sound like it's going to be a regular thing that's going to happen in Alberta. Somebody said on your call today, it's going to happen again. Well, it shouldn't happen again. Mm-hmm. We have to start developing systems or places to live that are safe. But I mean, it's focused. But another thing that struck me too is the amount of support and the amount of absolutely outpouring support that the Canadians have done for these people up in Edmonton. And the reason is because I think the majority of people, that 75% of the people that are living in Alberta, have went through tough times before, and now here they are again, and they're at it again, like they're just having a tough time. But everybody's going to be behind them. And I said to myself this morning when I was driving, you know what? There's heaven, and then there's Alberta. For the purpose that everybody has a great soul here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Doug. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. You take care. Jane Lee Pegovich writes to us, we lost our home to fire, and we understand the devastation. It took us a decade to pick up pieces. The wave of gratitude we felt from the community carried us forward. We are with you all, every single one of you. Tara writes on Facebook, I had a morning of gifts, love, and breakfast in bed in my home. I began to think of the moms and children of Fort McMurray. How will they spend Mother's Day today? Please send this along today, your listeners, so we can let the mothers of Fort McMurray know they are loved. If you want to participate online, send us an email at cbc.ca, or you can find us on Twitter. Search check out CBC. We're going to try to get one. See if we can get a couple more calls in here. Amanda Stevens is calling from Edmonton. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What are your thoughts about the Fort McMurray fire?
Well, there's been a lot of people talking about placing blame and why weren't people prepared for this. And you got to remember, this community's 5 hours north from the biggest, city centers, and so gridlocks, the traffic. You got 88,000 people out. Nobody was stuck in the city. Like, we're going to have a ton of time after this is done to rebuild and to figure out what we could have done better next time. But right now, there's a ton of people all across Canada that are displaced and are just grieving their losses. And the sensitivity that we need to have and recognizing this isn't just, I guess for me, it's like causing me, like my mind is just like exploding. It's like in Fort McMurray and my sister's displaced and my friends have lost their homes, you know? And it's awful. Like, I have a friend getting married soon whose house just burnt down. Like, there's awful things that, and I think in the, we know everyone's opinions about the refugee crisis, but like, we're getting our own kind of crisis, I guess, in Alberta right now with our friends and our family, and it kind of makes me think more, I guess, compassionately for the world and the things that are going on too, and just, we're just people. This is our community. We just got to do our best to like have a positive attitude. Like, I really don't want to hear anything more about the NDD sex or anything like that, because it doesn't matter right now. We've got a crisis happening. It's just,
there are people that are without their houses.
I guess. And
thanks very much for that, Amanda.
yeah,
we're closing on the end of the show, so I thank you for sharing that. And we're going to try to squeeze one last call in. Thanks, Amanda. We're going to try to squeeze one last call in. Suzanne Young is calling from Kelowna, British Columbia. Hi, Suzanne. Welcome to Cross Country Chat.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
You have some thoughts about Fort McMurray? I
do. We had a total lost fire in Kelowna, and I had 2 very sentimental items that I lost. One, set of snowshoes for my father, and a roll-top desk my mother had refinished and given to me. And I kind of both passed away. So those items were very dear to me and sentimental. And of course, you can replace almost everything else, but not items like that. So once I reconciled the fact that it was the memories of my parents that were special and precious, I was able to accept the loss of items a lot more and just carry on. And it's difficult to recover from, but the folks from Fort McMurray who lost their homes will get through it. And
do you have any advice for those folks, Suzanne?
I read in a Reader's Digest the day after a fire. It was a quotable quote. It said, be brave, and if you can't be brave, no one will know the difference. And that's how that gave me a lot of strength and also support everyone else.